Hey there, this is Pokket with MMORPG.com, bringing you part 2 of the top 10 countdowns for the reasons I'm going to be playing Star Wars, starting with number 7. So I bet you're all wondering what number 7 is, and you've been waiting a whole week. The combat animations are number 7. The combat animations in TOR are really smooth. If it's one thing that bothers me when playing an MMO, it's when the combat animations, the casting VFX, and even the S effects aren't smooth and distinguishable. But that's something that I really didn't have to worry about in this game. Once I got used to class abilities and what belonged to who, which is required of any new game, I knew what to look out for, what was friendly, and what was enemy fire. For example, a Jedi Knight and a Sith Warrior have an ability to jump to a target. The Sith Inquisitor and the Jedi Consulars have shields. The Agents and the Smugglers have a long cast time, high damage ability that make it more obvious that they are targeting a person. But why is this important? Well, because in PvP, it is always important to be able to tell the differences between the classes, including what they have cast, what they are casting, and what role they are playing to their team. Plus, it always helps players get immersed into their characters even more. There were only a few slight problems that I found. Force Lightning is definitely more visible than Telekinetic Throw. Smuggler Scoundrel and their Mirror are a bit harder to pick out as healers of their team. Their abilities are less distinguishable than their healing counterparts, the Consulars and the Troopers, especially when unfamiliar with the class. The Sith Inquisitor's Force Lightning doesn't change color between the Lightning spec and the Healing spec. Trust me, you'll regret the day you misjudge a Sith Inquisitor to be a healer when it is really spec'd into lightning. But let's move on to number 6, Flashpoints. Flashpoints also have their place in TOR, and though I've yet to experience a heroic Flashpoint, as hard as I tried to get to 50, I managed to run through quite a few Flashpoints while leveling up. The first Flashpoint, Black Talon, was a nice intro to Flashpoints. The mobs were fairly easy to take down, and the bosses had a few mechanics, but nothing that would overwhelm a player new to the game and getting familiar with their class mechanics. However, as I got into the higher level, the bosses did become quite a bit more difficult and actually required coordination that you'd expect from a Flashpoint, a tank, healer, and DPS. Naturally, the dungeon becomes even more difficult when you have a tank that wants to DPS and a DPS that is taking all the aggro, but that's a different story for a different day. The last Flashpoint that I managed to run through with my guild was Katamimu. Generally speaking, the boss fights did present a challenge. One boss, you had to kite their ads through the fire that they were shooting. And let me tell you, on the last boss, we wiped a couple times because we were in the wrong place at the wrong time when fire started shooting out of the walls. Naturally, like any other fight, after a try or two, they were easy to get down and defeat. I can only imagine how hard the heroic versions of these will be. I imagine quite a bit harder without gear. Moving on from boss fights, however, there were more things that Flashpoints actually presented. There were the social points gained through the group cutscenes. It's always entertaining to see how your group picks, especially when everybody picks dark side and one person picks light side, and they end up winning. Regardless, you're getting your dark side points, but the path and bosses unlocked for light side are different than those unlocked if your team was to choose and successfully win the role for dark side. And now for number 5, Heroic Quests. Heroic Quests were a nice change to the gameplay. It wasn't necessary that a player partake in a heroic quest. In fact, there were quite a few that I skipped while leveling up, but they certainly were interesting to complete. Some of the bosses I found within the heroic quest zones were just as difficult as some of the bosses found within the Flashpoints of the same level. There were different types of heroic quests, some that recommended 2+ players and ones that recommended 4+. Naturally, the ones that recommended 4+ players were quite a bit more difficult, and trust me, the 2 companions you have usually don't make up for the lack of the 2 other players. The only downside I saw in this was that it was sometimes difficult to get people together to do the heroic quests. Then again, it was beta and there wasn't always a significant amount of people on because it was limited at times. When I had guildmates on, it was rather easy, or at least I could get a higher level to come and help me out. But if I didn't have anyone on to help, I usually just steered away from doing any of the heroic content in the open world. That being said, there was one time I out-leveled a heroic quest, and then went back and completed it when I was a few levels above it. Now, it presented a pretty big challenge to me, even though I had out-leveled it and, you know, I had a companion with me. But the reward was still worth it, and it was a lot of fun to do by myself. So that's it for numbers 5 through 7. Stay tuned for numbers 2 through 4, which will be releasing sometime next week. And then after that, we just have number 1, the final reason. It's the final countdown. Don't forget to leave a comment below for your feedback on these top 10 items, as well as you can follow me on my Twitter, or you can find me on my main webpage that also has a new and cool calendar. Don't forget to also check out other reviews on MMORPG.com. I really need to work on my outro. My outro.